Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the unemployment situation and the uh, lack of workers and stuff like that. I want to go through some of the information out there and try to explain what's going on, um, see if I can make some sense of it. So first, I wanted to talk about, or like right off the bat, a lot of people think that the reason why there's a shortage of workers is because of federal benefits for unemployment related to COVID or indirectly related to COVID. So they used to be um, as part of one of the bills that passed either last year or earlier this year. It provided, I think it was like $300 for people who were unemployed. Um, it was set to expire in September. Um, it could have been continued, but it was not. Um, and so that's actually what these first couple articles about. Um, and specifically, it's about whether or not the benefits will continue. Obviously, it wasn't really politically possible. I mean, the Senate's very divided. I mean, it's 50-50, so can't get more divided than that. Uh, and not all Democrats were on board, and so it was essentially dead on arrival. Um, But so as they say here, they talk about benefits they affect gig workers, caregivers, et cetera, et cetera. Um, they 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 say that the labor shortage has to do with health concerns over COVID, um, yada yada. Uh, all pandemic unemployment benefits at Monday, Labor Day. Um, that was sometime in September, September 7th, I think, maybe. Um, yeah, they get their final $300 benefit check, and then that's it. Uh, so the unemployment checks originally were $600, and then they were lowered to 300. All right, so they're enacted during the CARES Act under the former administration. Um, yeah, and so a big theory that has been talked about a lot is that obviously $600 a week, that's a pretty substantial amount of money, and if you can get that you know for free, why go and get a job? And so I didn't actually realize that had been cut down to 300. But yeah, I mean, it's gone now as of September. But that was a theory, and one of these articles I have up here talks about it, but it doesn't seem to have actually correlated much to uh, a decrease in job openings, um, because a number of states actually did away with this unemployment benefit far earlier than September. And there was no noticeable change in the statistics for like unemployment and job opportunity growth or job openings, which I got a couple of charts up here that'll show some of that. Might make it a little bit more, it might make it more clear how exactly what's going on. So the government also continued to boost unemployment through federal pandemic unemployment compensation to reduce unemployment, paying an additional 334. They collect both. The unemployment extended again. No state has decided to continue issuing the checks beyond the federal deadline. So that's the key takeaway from this first article here is that um, the uh, the checks are gone. Unless something happens in the future, which I highly doubt will happen. No one's getting paid to stay at home essentially, and that's the first theory to kind of just check off because like so that's not entirely the case. That's not the case here at least. Um, the economy added almost quarter million jobs in August, under the expected jobs predicted. Here's what they talk about 24 Republican-led states have had cut off enhanced unemployment benefits earlier in the summer. These are all the states that did it. I live in Florida. I can say that where I'm at, we still have pretty decent shortage of workers. There are job offer signs all over the place, especially Publix. Publix is doing a pretty big drive to try to get in like 30,000 new workers. Uh, I don't know how it's going so far. Um, hopefully it's going well. And so that's back to work bonuses. A lot of people are, or a lot of companies are offering bonuses for joining. And so that's the bulk of that article. This article here, it's from a more conservative outlet. To kind of says the same exact thing. That always gonna have ads on here, of course. Yeah, Labor Day, the unemployment benefits are over. Set up by Congress 18 months ago. Get the virus force, unprecedented shutdown, blah blah blah. As the economy reopens, companies have complained about lack of available workers. Still 5.5 unemployed Americans. Oh, that's actually gone down a little bit. Although it's a really fascinating number. There's a record 10.1 million job openings. So you do have a. Well, we're going to see that in some of the graphs I have up there. But so this article pretty much restates everything from the previous article. Most of it, at least, talks about basically the lackluster expectations of. And they expected 750,000 new jobs. Wasn't quite the case. And so that brings us to the next question of why is unemployment still kind of high? Because I mean, it varies from state to state. Like we have this little graph here that'll show the lighter colored states like Vermont, they have the highest unemployment at the moment. Like there we go. So they've only recovered 90% of the jobs that they had in 2020. So I think that's on the bottom end. Of course, the higher ends are Idaho and South Dakota. All of these are explained by a lot of people moved here to work remotely from home, and that's why you see a higher than 100%. But most of these lighter blue states are at the upper 90%. Florida's at 94%. Texas 95%. Alaska 90%. I think actually Hawaii was the bottom. There, yeah, 89%. I guess I think for that one that could be explained by the drop in tourism and drop in the need for service workers, stuff like that. So you can see why those jobs may not have come back, not at full capacity at least. Then you have similar lower numbers for California. You're at 91%, Nevada 91%, Michigan 93%, Illinois 92%. So the one, it's possible these New York, Vermont, Illinois, Nevada, California, they might still have higher unemployment benefits. That maybe that would help explain why their percentages are a little bit lower, but their percentages aren't that much lower than the national average, which would probably be around 94%, 95%. I mean, it's only a few percentage points off from Texas. But let's see what they have to say. Yeah, economic recovery leaving millions of people behind, especially those with jobs depending on conventions, tourists, and live performances. That's, I think, one of the big takeaways is those jobs haven't likely fully come back, whereas other jobs have probably kind of moved up in their place. And state's tourism in Nevada still reeling in January. Latest federal figures show unemployment rates 8.1%, more than twice the level was a year earlier. The nationwide number of workers who have been temporarily laid off has declined sharply. Permanent job losses remain stubbornly high at around 3.5 million in February. Permanent job loss category covers people who don't have a job to return to and need to find a new one when the economy reopens completely. At the height of the jobless crisis in April of last year, 78% of the then 23 million unemployed Americans were temporarily laid off. Only 9% are in permanent loss category. As of last month, more than a third of the remaining 10 million unemployed are in permanent loss category, which means that their jobs are just gone. There's nothing to return to. And it seems like that's what the case is for Hawaii and tourist states. State by state numbers on permanent job losses are available, but California, Connecticut, Maryland, Nevada, and Vermont have lost nearly a tenth of overall jobs they had last year. So that would actually explain their why they're lighter on the map, uh, which seems to have, oh, there it is. Yeah, that would explain why they're lighter, because they're those jobs are just altogether gone. Two states have bucked the trend. That's what I mentioned. Idaho, South Dakota kept people employed because they didn't have the stronger restrictions that kept businesses closed, as well as people relocating there. And then, let's see. People finding jobs, employment growth is likely to, if people have to find jobs, employment growth is likely to slow, according to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. I guess that's the idea. There would be having to find, having to leave behind maybe a previous industry or previous company, the people who would have lost their jobs permanently. Let's see. Yeah, hard hit metros like Maui and Vegas will come back because people still want to go to those places. Might take a year or two, and some workers can't wait that long, and that's why you're seeing. I wouldn't call it an exodus, but people just going where the jobs are, or closer to where the jobs are at least. Massachusetts, where the ranks of unemployed are still almost triple what they were last year. Labor Secretary Rosalina Costa told lawmakers this month the vast majority, 250,000 of the total 300,000 jobless, no longer have jobs to go back to. So, advocated for funding for technical schools to retrain people. Proposed state budget includes an increase of 4 to 15 million. That's interesting. Michigan started a tuition-free community college plan in February that drew thousands of applications aimed partly at people with low-skilled jobs. There's a growing consensus that the economy coming out of a pandemic is different than the one before it. That definitely seems to be true so far. Nevada won a grant to retrain workers during the downturn in fast-growing fields such as healthcare, technology, and manufacturing, joining other states working to retrain hard-hit hospitality workers. I've heard people suggest doing retraining stuff like this for people in the Rust Belt, people who formerly worked in the coal mines or manufacturing plants, industries that have severely been cut down or have been relocated. To keep those places still stronger and vibrant. Although I don't know if anything like this has actually been implemented in those areas, places like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Michigan, and in that area. They were hoping for unemployment benefits that never materialized by the state system. So yeah, so this basically talks about how the changing situation of having to relocate due to jobs not being available and jobs that won't come back for quite some time. It's kind of like a changing demographics in a way. And so that brings us to the next article. The pandemic did not permanently shrink the labor force. People have talked about how, there's an aging population. The baby boomer generation is, growing older, and they're a very large population. And so it would make sense that maybe 2020 was just a good year to retire. It would make sense. But however, according to this article, they say that there were signs that many older people were actually returning to work, with the employment rate for workers aged 55 and older having recovered to about 2/3 of its pandemic-induced decline. So that's, it's still, 33, 34% not working, but the majority came back. And let's see, the employment rate for workers age 25 to 54, often called prime age workers, currently stands at 78%, 2.4% points below its level before the pandemic. It seems unlikely that almost 2.4 million people in their peak working years have suddenly decided that they would prefer no longer to work. And it's worth noting that, there is no unemployment benefit to claim. So if you're not working, how are you sustaining yourself. I know there's some people still living with parents, still living at home. So that's something you could fall back on. Uh, Maybe, fall back on your parents, go back to school, try to get a trade job, try to, you know, get out of lower wage jobs like, service jobs and such, gig work. Um, let's see what else we have. If those people were to take a job in your future, that group alone would be enough to fill roughly 27% of the remaining employment rate we have. And September, 825,000 prime age out of work people said they didn't search for a job due to the pandemic, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So there's, there's obviously still some fear over COVID-19. Vaccinations have alleviated some of the worst effects, and I realize I'm reading this backwards. May have alleviated some of the worst effects of the disease for those who received the jab, but the disease is still holding back many job seekers. It's worth noting too that some people who prefer not to have the vaccine, who might be unemployed now, that probably has some small role to play in all this. Other impediments to out-of-work people taking a job right now are like the fade. Household savings have risen dramatically since last spring, potentially allowing more people to be more patient about returning to work. So that's another good point. Is if you had any savings at all, you could just ride that out, especially if you theoretically, if you had it. A larger financial cushion is a reason for lack of urgency. Extra funds won't last forever. New fiscal stimulus payments are unlikely. I would say they're impossible. I would be shocked if there was another stimulus for individual people, at least. So let's see, what do we have next? There we go. So this is the first graph. Let me go up to the top. Millions lose jobless benefits today. It doesn't mean they'll be rushing back to work. The point of this article was to show that despite the benefits ending and the expectation that people would just be rushing back to go to work to pay their bills and get paid again, that there's just more jobs that are available than there are people seeking jobs. And we can see here, so this is, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're seeing job openings from January of 2011 to June of 2011 or 2021. Now we see this kind of steady rise in the wake of the recession. It's on this trajectory that, it's upward trajectory. You could probably argue that had there not been a pandemic, it might have actually hit this point or right around this point anyways. But, you see the big drop in, job openings, obviously a lot of closures, lockdowns, pandemic, and then pretty quickly it shoots back up. It doesn't fully recover, but it's, by this point, it appears as though it's almost fully recovered. It's back to its original pattern. And what is worth noting is that the unemployment rate has been declining as this number has been going up. And I'm going to show that in the next couple of graphs as well. But there was, this talks about how the ending of those unemployment benefits didn't really impact the jobs that were available. It didn't impact the shortage of workers. There is still a shortage of workers despite the unemployment benefits ending. And that was what 22 states or so that had ended it months prior to the September ending. So we see here, there wasn't a huge difference in the rate at which they returned to work, said economists from the University of Toronto, who conducted some research about local economies. There are people that buy groceries and put gas in a car and frequent local businesses. When the money's not there, it's not going to be the person who's unemployed that's going to suffer. It's going to be the entire community. Several. Let's see. Yeah, so then the support comes as hiring has slowed sharply amidst a new wave of coronavirus infections. This article was early September. So the what was the Delta variant is kind of calmed down a bit. It seems to have mostly you know, mostly calmed. And there's still a lot of obviously there's still a lot of death happening, but the levels have dropped quite a bit. So I guess I'll just jump to the next graph, which is basically the same graph, but so this shows us uh, a few different lines. All right, so the first line to look at is, and they say non-farm hires. It's just basically that. That's obviously another chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can see here this line represents separations from this is 2006 to 2021. So separations obviously being layoffs or uh, short-term. What would they call it when I know the plane industries did there. I forget what it's called exactly, but um, we can see this giant spike here. Obviously, that being uh, the closures and the lockdowns, and we see it go from what January 2020 was 3.8%, and then it goes all the way up to 10% in that March, but then it kind of comes back down as things kind of sort of go back to normal. And then we see here total openings, and so that's hiring. So the hiring, jumped pretty drastically, as you can see. That initial, the initial post lockdown, it would make sense that a lot of those people would come back, although not everyone came back. And so here we see, there we go, total openings. And so we see a pretty dramatic, just as the previous picture showed, the previous article, a dramatic increase in job openings. And so I think to best understand that would be to look at the unemployment rate. And so we can kind of compare these two. You see this large increase in openings. It's going pretty far up. It's actually come down a little bit. It was higher in July. It went down just a couple of percentage points in August. No data for September yet, but we see that it's pretty high up there. But we see also that the unemployment rate has dropped quite significantly. So much of the population most of the population that had lost work has gone back to work. Right before the pandemic really went crazy, we were at 3.5% unemployment. We're only 1.3% away from that. So, and if in that 1.3% you account for maybe that third of people who were 55 and up, let's say that they just retired. Let's say that they're done. They're not coming back. Let's say the percentage of people who just aren't searching for jobs due to the pandemic. Maybe they have health concerns. Maybe they're at risk more so than the average person. It would kind of explain why. It would explain why unemployment might still be at 4.8%. Although I don't know if this percentage point includes people that are not actively seeking jobs, but there are a couple different definitions used for what unemployment is. But it's the reason I put all this together is to show that there's a lot more job openings than there are people seeking jobs. That's what seems to be the case. And on top of that, why aren't people seeking jobs? I mean, I think this graph would make it appear as though the vast majority of people are seeking jobs, but why are the remainder of those people? Haven't they sought out jobs? That is anyone's guess. It's could be just continued education, the fear of the pandemic, but it's not unemployment benefits. They're not making $600 a week anymore. That's all over, and it's as you can see, this is up until this point when this 4.8% was put out, like up until that point, had been unemployment benefits, and the vast majority of the recovery had already taken place. Like, there's only just a little bit more to go to get back on where we were previously at 3.5%. So, unless the idea is that $300 a week was, making that smaller difference, which maybe, it'll be interesting to see what the unemployment rate is for October. Although there seems to be a number of other factors that go into why unemployment is where it's at and why we have such a high number of job openings. I mean, this graph actually makes it seem a little bit higher than where it would have been had this trend continued. I would say, like, if it had continued to be maybe around 6% or so, that's what it seemed to be at. But this is, what was it, 7%? Yeah, it's a little bit higher than I would have expected. Then the trend would make it seem, anyways. So that's pretty much what I've got for today. I'll link all of these articles and charts in the description. Check it out. See if you can find some useful information in it. And that's about it. I hope everything's going okay, and thanks for watching. Leave a like and a comment if you want to drop any comments, and see you next time.